The Vancouver Canucks have been one of the NHL's biggest surprises in the 2023-24 season. Being led by their valiant captain Quinn Hughes, they've been able to surprise experts and fans alike and dominate the league. They've been playing at a rate the league hasn't seen from them since 2011 and 12, where they won the President's Trophy in back-to-back seasons, and were one game away from becoming the first Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup since 1993. Flash forward to today, and they are near the top once again, sitting at second place in the league and first in the Western Conference. Vancouver has seen many players take big strides in their game, like JT Miller and Quinn Hughes. And this opens up the question of if their success will sustain itself going into the playoffs and the upcoming seasons down the road. Join me as we explore this question and eventually find an answer within the statistics. Now, if you ask a Canucks fan, they'll obviously tell you that the Canucks are incredibly sustainable. While I love fandom and watching hockey with a biased view as much as the next guy, I want to work with objectivity here and come to a fair, unbiased answer. Let's start with their off-season moves from last season to see if there were any additions that warranted such a monumentous increase in their standings position. See, the Canucks finished in 22nd place in the NHL standings last season, landing 12 points out of a playoff spot. So an uninformed observer must assume that a massive lineup change took place over the offseason. There was quite a large change for the Canucks defensively. They completely overhauled their defense to surround Hughes with players who will help him grow. They lost Travis Dermott, Ethan Bear, and Kyle Burrows in free agency, and they also bought out Oliver Ekman-Larsson. To combat these losses, they added Carson Soucy and Ian Cole in free agency, traded for Filip Hronek last March, and traded for Nikita Zadorov last December. These moves were a massive net positive for the Canucks, and they were hoping to see massive improvement in team defense. See, Ekman-Larsson had been a massive disappointment to the Canucks, and the other players lost made no real impact on the defensive talent of the team. The addition of Cole, Soucy, Zadorov, and Hronek totally counterbalanced their losses and then some, as Cole and Zadorov are big-bodied defensemen who are defensively sound, block shots, and get into passing lanes effectively, while Soucy and Hronek are guys who look to be able to pair up well with Quinn Hughes on the first pair. Vancouver also added Pierre Suter and Teddy Bluger in the offseason, and they are both very defensively minded forwards. Suter has even seen a great deal of time on the first line, while Bluger is a rock defensively centering the fourth line. Suter hasn't been the biggest of contributors, but he has mainly filled Bo Horvat's spot in the top six. Well, he didn't directly fill Horvat's spot, but Horvat was their main loss in the top six, and Suter was their main top six addition, so you get my point. These moves most definitely should see massive defensive improvement, but I'm not so sure it is deserving of a 20-place jump in the standings. So we'll have to dig deeper to really find out if the Canucks have gotten extremely lucky or if their success has a more sustainable reason. Let's take a look at some team stats from last season to this season. The Canucks have jumped up about 0.24 goals per game from last season to this season, which shows that the offensive core has taken some strides as a team. They have also seen a massive jump in depth scoring as well, as 14 players on their team have recorded over 20 points thus far, and 9 players have recorded 10 or more goals. This basically means that the Canucks offense relies less on the production of their star players, and allows for a more consistent team production, where success isn't determined by one or two key players performing well or not. Let's compare that depth to another offensively minded team like the Toronto Maple Leafs. This year, the Leafs have only 10 players reach the 20-point plateau, and a measly 7 reach 10 goals. This tells us that night in, night out, the Canucks, while maybe lacking slightly in star power, will put up more offensively consistent performances than most other teams. Well, on the idea of offense, the Canucks have seen quite a leap in shooting percentage this season, going from 11.1 last season to 12.5 this season. Shooting percentage is just goals divided by shots, so in the Canucks case, This stat tells us that either their offense has improved tremendously in shot quality, or they have gotten a lot luckier. Their offensive improvement in both goals per game and shooting percentage is backed by not only their depth, but also their forward core improving, instead of improvements based off of trades. Their two main contributors have been Quinn Hughes and JT Miller. Hughes is on an incredible pace for a defenseman, as he is looking at a 94-point season if things continue as they've been. Hughes is taking off, and this is by far his best year, but with this being his age 24 season, you just cannot call this a career year for him, because he is still growing, and this may sound crazy, but he may be capable of way more in the future. Quinn Hughes is just crazy good, and he might just be a perfect fit for a breakdown. Let me know what you think of that possibility below. Anyways, let's get back on track here. Hughes and the Canucks have been complemented by JT Miller's incredible play. He's on pace for 108 points, and unlike Hughes, this is definitely a career year for Miller. Miller is in age 30th season, and at this point in his career, he's looking at the bell curve of production going down instead of up as is for Hughes. JT Miller's season was kind of unexpected, as he put up 99 points in 2021-22, and then 82 points in 22-23, so it looked like his career was on a downtrend going into this season. Elias Pettersson should also be mentioned here, because not only has he just signed a massive deal to keep him in Vancouver for 8 more years, which, pray for him, because living in Vancouver is something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, but he is also on pace to put up his second 100-point season. And with Pettersson only being 25, we can predict that 1 or 2 more 100-point years can be in his future. With all that being said, other than JT Miller, their offensive production has been very sustainable, and one can very reasonably expect this kind of play to hold up throughout their future. So for the time being, it looks like the Vancouver Canucks are sustainable. Let's move on now to the defensive side of the puck though. We have witnessed a massive improvement in the Canucks' goals against per game. They've improved tremendously, going from 3.60 last season to 2.73 this season, which is a 0.87 improvement in goals against per game. Their offensive improvement, while notable, means almost nothing when you compare it to their defensive improvement. I mentioned earlier that they added defensive improvements in the form of an entirely new defensive core, and what they have added has completely worked out for them and their GM Patrick Alvin in every way they could have imagined. Their defense has not only improved on their blue line, but also in their forward core as well, as I mentioned earlier. The addition of Blueger and Suter in their lineup has allowed for safety and security on the ice when they are in their own zone, or even on the penalty kill, where Blueger has been a lot this season. As a team, they are 7th in hits this season out of 32 teams, which is exactly where they were last season. Despite not seeing any increase in hits thrown, I still want to highlight this because having a physical team allows for protection for younger players like Hughes, who by the way should never be fighting his own battles. But it also allows for increased space offensively and defensively. Offensively speaking, being physical and being a known physical presence will open up space for you on the ice that weaker, in a physicality sense, players would not see. I talked a little bit about this concept in my Alexander Ovechkin video, which I suggest you watch after this one. On the defensive side though, physicality will force opposing players to make quicker decisions due to being afraid of being absolutely plastered onto the boards. Physicality goes hand in hand with defense, as usually the better defensive teams will have that physical aspect to scare their opponents and cut off plays effectively with their bodies. To pivot this video back into the concept of sustainability though, I think their defensive game is incredibly sustainable for 2 reasons. First of all, defense, while can be determined on a player-to-player basis, is more so a defensive system that is created by the coaching staff. And we heard from the coaching staff of the Canucks that defense was a top priority coming into this season, so we can expect them to keep with their current ideologies regarding defensive structure and play. And secondly, despite having 3 of their top 6 defensemen becoming unrestricted free agents next season, I believe most, if not all of them, will re-sign. Cole and Myers are two older guys, over 30 years old, the both of them, and so their market is going to be quite limited due to that. And the comfort and success they've found in the Canucks systems will entice them to stay. And for the other UFA, Zadorov, he seems quite content with Vancouver at the moment, and he seems to have a good relationship with the organization. So if you're able to retain that defensive core that helped you be so successful, it will do great things for the team's sustainability in terms of consistent play. Now, at this point it looks like the Canucks are having a pretty sustainable season, with their defense playing incredibly well paired with their great offense. But there is one more aspect I want to look at, and that is goaltending. The Canucks are one of the teams in the NHL that are blessed with a consistently above average goaltender. Finding a goalie that is consistent is possibly the biggest challenge for an NHL team, but the Canucks have that in Thatcher DEMKO. DEMKO has been a long-time Canuck, debuting with them in 2017-18, and over that time he has played to a .911 save percentage and a 2.81 goals against average. His save percentage this season has not wavered too much from his career save percentage, as it sits at .915 this season, which is to say he's not having a crazy career year, which is bolstering the Canucks' numbers. His goals against average this season is way better than his career average though, at 2.52, wavering from a 2.81 career average. But that is just simply due to the fact that this is by far the best defensive team he has ever had in front of him. If we want to get into their backup goalie situation, to see if we have an outlier there, their backup is Casey DeSmith. He is having a below average season at an .898 save percentage, 0.005 worse than the league average, which sits at .903 this season. Covering just about every single aspect of a hockey team, the Canucks' success this year seems to be incredibly sustainable. The only areas of question are JT Miller and whether or not they sign their defensive core back. But even if those two areas of question don't pan out in favor of the Canucks, they'll still be fine. Worst case scenario next season, they'll sit around 4th to 8th place. Best case scenario, they're gunning back for the President's Trophy again. The Canucks' turnaround from 22nd to 2nd is all because of their work on defense. Never in my life have I ever seen a team pivot so quickly on their defensive core and find this much success doing so. All the credit goes to Patrick Elvin, and he's built a team that will compete for years to come. And maybe, just maybe, rectify that disappointment they felt in 2011. That's all I got on the Nucks though, so thank you for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and check out my last video on how Montreal wasted Carey Price's career. See you all later.